Hi, I'm Ronald Waddell Jr., and I'm running for state rep of the 15th Worcester District. I'm Ron Waddell, and I'm running for state rep of the Worcester 15th District because a lot of the challenges that I see as I go around talking to residents, knocking on doors, are many of the ones that I'm experiencing. I rent right on Elm Street. I have two boys that are in Worcester Public Schools, and these challenges, such as affordability, our education, and safety, are key to all the things that I do. And I believe that I am the right person to help make some of these adjustments to support our community. Also, being present with folks. I love Worcester. I love just being around down through Main Street, through Shrewsbury Street, getting to meet all the different individuals, their cultures, the demographics, and all those areas is so rich opportunities that we have here in Worcester. And so I want to learn to be able to help them and support them with all the things that they may need. I'll tell you one of the things that is important to me in my running is when I say I understand the issues, it's not because I have read a book. I grew up in South Jersey with a single mother of four. She passed away when I was 15. I ended up in the foster care system. Later on, when I was 22, I took on a foster son at 15. I navigated all these different challenges to be able to pull myself up into a position to be successful. I know how difficult these systems are. I know how affordability and the ability to be able to provide for yourself creates challenges. But when I see those, I lean in to create solutions. I work with folks through my nonprofit, and we built an organization that is literally helping men who have returned from incarceration to provide pathways for economic mobility for them, which is a public health issue, a public safety issue, and ultimately economic mobility. When we're supporting that population, we have safer neighborhoods, we have better opportunities for our economy. And so I talk about the systems, I understand the systems, and then create ways to be able to impact those for the positive. The housing crisis is a major issue here in Worcester and across the country. Recent reports put us as Massachusetts 45th, meaning only 5 other states have produced the amount of housing in the most recent years. And so we've got to be able to make sure that we are providing new opportunities for zoning to get more houses built more quickly. We need to be thinking creatively. Maybe properties like Anna Maria, how can they be repurposed? We need to be very creative in providing these. I'm standing here at Aria on the Row, where we have young professionals that are finding it very difficult while making a professional living to even afford where they are. And so, what are multiple ways that we can bring that down? We have to increase the amount of houses we have in this area for our seniors, for our young professionals, and those who are trying to take care of their families. One of the things in the work that I do at Legendary Legacies is we know that there are some reports that suggest that the development of new carceral systems are based on the third grade reading level of a area. And so what deeply troubles me is to find out in a recent report that only 28% of our third graders are reading at third grade proficiency. That means 1 in 4 of our students in our public schools are at or exceeding the third grade reading level. And I'll tell you why that's critically important. From pre-K to third grade, you're learning how to read. From third grade on, you read to learn. If we have not invested in our young people to be successful at reading proficiently by third grade, these longitudinally are going to create public health issues. They're going to create public safety issues. And we have limited the economic mobility of our entire city. Those challenges are coming our way if we do not invest heavily in making sure that our youngest citizens are getting the support they need. And I really think that universal pre-K is something that I want to push. When I had my two boys who were 17 months apart, It was a decision that me and their mom had to make to pull her out of the workforce because we were essentially just moving money. The cost of them being in childcare was equivalent to someone who was enrolled in post-secondary education. Being able to make sure that we're not pulling a family member, a caregiver out of the workforce while providing that early education is critical. In some parts of our district, we recognize that even before we hit kindergarten, if you have the ability to cover the cost of childcare, you are getting a whole different rigor of education and curriculum than someone like us who had to have our son stay with a church member. And we appreciate her. But just watching TV, by the time we hit kindergarten, we have a drastic difference in our ability to matriculate. One of the things I want to say first and foremost is that Massachusetts and Worcester is one of the safest mid-sized cities in the country. However, we do know that we have a higher occurrence of crime in our city than our surrounding towns. I've had the privilege to travel the country to look at how 21st public safety is being implemented. And what that looks like is investing heavily in community-based mental health workers to support those that are at the grassroots level. These are members that are from the community, that have credibility, and investing in their professional development. And I'll tell you what, when I think about the budget, this is the proper investment because on an annual basis, someone who's incarcerated can run us a cost of about $100,000. However, when we support those type of initiatives to intervene and provide pathways, not only does that not cost us, we provide them opportunities to contribute to our tax base. And so it's a force multiplier. And this type of violence that we see, it's a public health issue. When you think of violence in that way as a disease that it has to be treated, we have to make sure we have the proper attendance to that. And so I would fight for investing in more funds for community-based mental health workers to support those that are in our community, to interrupt and provide more support for economic mobility. Well, first things first, our minimum wage is not causing the homelessness. When we think about those who are currently unhoused, there are mental health challenges. There are various number of challenges we face, especially with our seniors, which is one of our fastest growing unhoused populations. One of the biggest issues we have is lack of trust. And so when you have someone who's from the community, who understands those challenges, and then is uniquely skilled in navigating our systems that are sometimes, in my opinion, a little too complicated, but to support someone to navigate them, to get the supports they need, it is an absolute game changer. It provides the necessary navigation for someone to move from those challenges to prosperity. And I talk about that because there were folks that did that for me. When I lost my mother at 15, from that time, 17 through 19, I dealt with homelessness. It was a program like Job Corps and the wraparound support services from that allowed me to find stability and make my way to a position where I could be successful and give back to help others. And so one of the things that you need to be credible is to be present, to be in the neighborhood, to talk to those neighbors. They need to see, touch, and feel you. For me, state representative, as I've heard from some of my mentors, is your closest person to your government. And so that person needs to be frequently in the communities. And in this district, we have various different neighborhoods that have a myriad of different challenges. And so if you're not present, then you don't know. And so I am present in these neighborhoods. I'm working with those individuals. And I want to make sure that there are better opportunities. There is more investment for those, safer streets. When I walk down into Ward 3 and I'm there on Lincoln Street and I look at some of the opportunities for us to invest in the built infrastructure of that street, making sure that our kids that are passing through those schools and those parks can cross safely. This only happens when you are present in those neighborhoods and talking to the people and hearing those challenges. And so my approach, very much like the work I do inside my organization, is being present where those challenges are, talking with those people, and then taking that to the State House and fighting and making sure as best we can, we get the funds that we need here for Worcester in this 15th district, which is the economic heartbeat of our entire city. When I begin to think about health and women's health, particularly, I'm taken back to a girlfriend that I had in my early 20s. She had immigrated from El Salvador, and her reason for immigrating was she was pregnant, and there was a violent gang that had threatened her life. And so she made her way here, and she needed to have an abortion. When I think about what the country on a federal level has done to make it so much more difficult for our women to get quality health care, and quality health care means the full wraparound services. We have to protect this. Fortunately, we're here in Massachusetts, and we have made sure that we held those rights. My role is to ensure that those are never voted against, that those are always protected, and no man should ever have a chance to tell a woman to do what she needs with her body. It's critical important to me. I am a brother with 3 sisters raised by a single mother. And so women's issues and women's health in particular is something that is near and dear to my heart. But it's important that we get quality health care across the board. But we're watching the federal government make this even more difficult on our women, immigrant populations. We know that the infant mortality rate for our African American women is lower than any other demographic. And so making sure there are other options, full wraparound prenatal and postnatal care, such as midwiferys and other options besides just our traditional healthcare networks. We need to provide as many options as possible to make sure that women and their children are protected. My position on abortion is that is a woman's right to choose. She should make that decision with her loved ones and with her medical professionals. At no point should the state or federal government be involved in such a personal and critical decision. And nor should, again, someone who is so far removed from those issues be opining or setting laws that dictate how they should take care of their bodies. It's absolutely correct. I support the Massachusetts state laws around abortion, and I would never vote against those. And I would always protect to make sure that those stay in place if there's anyone fighting to erode them. When we think about a myriad of our issues, we have to recognize that community-based community centers are critical to providing the necessary resources and support to those neighbors. Just yesterday, I was at the Pleasant Street Neighborhood Network Center's neighborhood meeting. This is where I used to gather 20 years ago, part of Mothers United working against violence. And I was deeply saddened to hear the members there talk about how they may have to close their facility because of a struggle with funding. This is a critical component that was established some 20 years ago to make sure that neighbors in that area have the support. And over the last couple of years, it has evolved to be a after-school program, arts, school, after-school homework, gathering. There was one young man who would use that location as the primary place where he could go to wash his clothes. For me, this is my neighborhood. I'm just right up the street on Elm Street. And so I would fight to make sure that we keep that place open, whether it be from the city or the state, pulling earmarks to make sure that this is funded at the capacity it needs. Because if that's not there, the uptick in crime, the uptick in challenges related to substance misuse are only going to be exacerbated. This is not something that's window dressing. This is a critical piece of the community infrastructure that is near and dear to my heart and those that I serve. and the residents that I would have the privilege of representing. When I think about funding coming from the state for these critical community-based centers, for me, there are a number of different levers that a state rep could pull. One is earmarks. We could allocate funds specifically. And when I think about the current incumbent, I have to be honest, I'm not sure that that has happened for the Pleasant Street Neighborhood Center. And so when I think about state dollars going into our community-based neighborhood centers, and I think about the current incumbent and how that center may be closing, this is absolutely infuriating, especially understanding that it was state dollars from a state representative prior to the current incumbent that made this possible, that got this off the ground. I can imagine for the hard work of that legislature to get that passed, to get this off the ground, must also be discouraging. And so for me, it's a matter not just because of that investment, but we have to build on those. It's not just about the last 10 years, it's about thinking about the next 10 years. And how do we ensure as these neighborhoods change and evolve that these critical infrastructures remain? When I think about inclusion, it's making sure those who had various lived experiences are at and in and around the table. If we're making decisions with only a limited few, not just demographic, but what has been their lived experience? What I bring to the table is a person who has grown up as an African-American male on welfare, made his way through a foster care system, has a sister who is part of the LGBTQ community, has lived with Haitian immigrants during part of my homelessness, was then a partner to a female who is part of the LGBTQ community, and a parent who is parenting two young boys in our current public school system. When I think about the intersectionality of inclusion, it's hard not to see that I am at the center of all those things. And it's natural for me to want to open up opportunities for various folks who have not had the chance. Part of my running is that very reason. I've come to find out that there has never been a person of color who has represented the second largest city in New England to date at the State House. Just the very idea of someone with my story and my background being in that position, I hope can be inspiring to many of the young men, children who have never thought or dreamed that it was possible to be in a position to make such change. These are the types of things that we need to be thinking about for our future. They are growing, things are changing, and we need to make sure that we're including all voices at the table, not just because it's a theory or it is a good read, but it's because I have been a part of it. You hear it often repeated that small businesses are the backbone of our economy here. Well, we need to make sure that we're investing heavily in those small businesses. As someone who runs a nonprofit that has reached about 1.8 million now, who has 14 employees, I know the myriad of challenges as it takes right now to ensure that they're getting the proper benefits, healthcare supports, and all those things so they can thrive. We need to think about creative solutions, microloans, in-home businesses, supporting those online businesses. I was really excited to see first of its kind at the Maine South CDC investing in businesses as potential owners so that the money stays in the neighborhood. We need to, and I will, ensure that in our city, in those neighborhoods, that we're creating opportunities where we can continue to invest in those small businesses and make sure that that dollar stays within those communities much longer than it does right now. Another area for me is transparency. I want to lean into government transparency in a way that the current incumbent doesn't. I know that majority of the folks that are in certain parts of the district are unaware how our civic institution works. Me running is providing an opportunity for me to learn how the districts, the precincts, the wards work. If you want the government to work for you, then we have to be involved in investing. Many of our population are not well represented in our voting. And so I am really interested in investing in civic academies for our young professionals and young people. If we want an educated voter base, we have to start early explaining to them so that they are at the table, that things that have not been thought of are now being included. Here in Worcester, just like everywhere, the majority of our voting is done by those who are 55 and older, and we love them. To get a full representation as our district is evolving and changing, we have to also make sure that our younger folks, our newer residents, understand how our civic infrastructure and government work. And I am deeply invested in making sure that that is available, accessible, so that we can have better representation in our vote, in our city, and in our state.